Oh my goodness, it's the 50th story to be commentated upon in Happy Times and Places, this series in which I, Toby Haydoke, get a special guest to choose a Doctor Who story, to watch it and select in secret their favourite things about it. I then have to watch, commentate, and guess what those things might be.
Hello Toby, Chris Cassell here, freelance animator and graphic designer. Thanks so much for asking me to be involved with this. Here I am in the Dark Tower. Behind me, the four-poster bed of Rassilon. If you hadn't guessed by my clues so far, the story I'd like to nominate is the 1983 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors. I would have seen this story back in 1990, so almost 30 years ago, wow, on this VHS tape here with some lovely artwork there by Alistair Pearson. And I watched the McCoy run at the time, and I was aware there were other Doctors, but I had no idea that they could coexist until I watched this, and it blew my tiny mind. I love a lot about the story, so it's going to be a bit tricky to condense that all into, a selection of 5, but I'm going to do my best.
Well, hello everybody. Well, this is an epic. I'm going through the night because it's quite late already. But Bernard is asleep at the other end of the sofa. I wonder if he'll shift with all the excitement. My other half has been packed off up to bed. And I am celebrating 50 releases of Happy Times and Places. That means nothing because some of the releases have been 6 episodes and some have been 4 and some have been 1 if it's Modern Day Who. This is a sort of synthesis of all those things because it's 1 episode, but it's a long one. And I mean, my equivalent, I suppose, because I can release these in any order, you see, because I've got a sort of backlog of... whoever sent me their nominations. But I thought for the 50th, I would, go for the story that is the big anniversary story for me, which is The Five Doctors. Chris, who saw it after, Chris, a lovely guy, by the way, saw it after it was first broadcast on VHS, so it was already a relic for him, whereas I saw it not on the day of broadcast. We might talk about that, but a kind friend from school videoed it, and then I went to stay at his for the weekend, which meant sacrificing a weekend at home, because I was I was at boarding school, but not because we had money. In fact, quite the opposite. My dad left us fairly sort of destitute, but he was from the medical profession and a charity that looked after bereaved doctors' families. Although we weren't bereaved, we were abandoned, but let's not get into that. Offered me a free place at a school that meant that Mum could go back to work, but I had to sleep there, and I got to come home for weekends only. Not even weekends, Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning, pretty much. Not a terribly happy existence, if I'm honest, especially when Doctor Who was on in the weekdays and I had to get my friend to tell me what had happened, because there was no, we didn't know people with videos, but there was a kid at school. I think my mum must have arranged it, or maybe not. Anyway, we knew that this friend of mine had videoed it, and so I was allowed to go and stay at his for the weekend and watched it. And I think I watched it a couple of times. But it's a very special story for me, and it's then one that I got to see a lot because it turns out the school had videotaped it, and on sports day afternoons, it was sort of in the common room. It was just sort of playing on a loop, so I actually got to watch it quite a lot and could quote it: "Freeze, Sarah Jane, if you move, we're dead." And yet I haven't seen this, and I am watching the transmitted version, because then for years after the special edition, that was the version I watched because it was new and it didn't have an embarrassing black triangle. It had a state-of-the-art blob of ice cream. So all sorts of things to conjure with this. And Chris, lovely Chris, I also associate with recordings, because when I was touring my one-man show, Moss Ate My Doctor Who Scarf, when I went to Kirkcaldy, it was the same night that Midnight was on. I think I was actually on stage when Midnight was on. So that was not a great piece of planning. And very sweetly, he bought me a DVD of it so that I could play it and watch it on my computer when I went to bed after I'd been for a drink with him and Laura. So, another friend recording for me, because I was unable to watch Doctor Who live. So I associate it with all of that. But I think also what's really special about this story is that what a time to be a fan this was. I was 9. It was the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who. And I think if it hadn't been for the Doctor Who Radio Times special, Doctor Who A Celebration, the 5 Doctors, the brouhaha of the 20th anniversary, where Doctor Who was at its peak, and it's amazing how quickly it fell, actually, and within a very short space of time was suddenly not the force to be reckoned with it once was. I mean, it's amazing when you think of how popular Longleat was and the 5 Doctors was, and all of that, and how cemented in the public psyche Doctor Who was. That a very short time later is when it started to be this kind of national joke and unloved by the corporation that benefited so much from it. Extraordinary story. But anyway, talking of extraordinary stories, why aren't I saying this during a lull in the action? Because I'm sure I've got to go for an hour and a half on the trot. So without further ado, I am on. Now how do I do this? So I am watching the original, as transmitted, Black Triangle version of The 5 Doctors, which was broadcast in 1983 when Doctor Who was 20. It is now approaching 60. What that means for me, I don't want to contemplate. You're very welcome to join me watching, or just listen to me rabbiting, but I am going to press play in 3, 2, 1. And we start with William Hartnell. I love the fact that Hartnell is in it. In fact, I just quoted some of this. I don't know why. Somebody had said something. There was only 2 of us in the garden, myself and my partner. And I think we said something about anxieties. And so I went, no regrets, no anxiety. I did this quote. And I'm prone to quoting Shakespeare around the house. And I go, what was that from? And Shirley will go, oh, probably blooming Shakespeare. And I go, yeah, obviously, but which one? And she'll go, don't know, Henry the Ninth. And I'll go, that's not even a Shakespeare play. And I'll be pompous, and she doesn't really care. And I'll tell her off for being wasted on the acting profession. But anyway, I did that, and she went, oh, I really like that one. That's the only one of those you've done I've ever liked. What Shakespeare play is that from? And I went, episode 6 of the Dalek Invasion of Earth. Anyway, so it's nice to have a clip of William Hartnell. Funny enough, I mean, it wasn't long after that that there was talk of. It was when it was actually it was when it was TV 50. So, but there was talk in Doctor Who magazine of there being a repeat of an old Doctor Who, and word came in, and it said in Doctor Who magazine that the version of Dalek Invasion of Earth was too poor quality to be shown, and suddenly going, what, hang on, so in fact some of the episodes that exist are too poor quality to be shown. I don't know quite where they got that from, but the talk was that they repeat the chase. But suddenly, you think about that. I like the way her hair moves. I used to be able to quote all of this. I love a thump of the console. But yeah, it suddenly introduced the concept that Dalek Invasion of Earth was not good enough quality to be shown. Because I remember thinking of that clip and going, well, it looked all right to me. I actually think, even though this looks like, I think somebody else has used the phrase a wet weekend in Wales, there's something about the way that Mark Strickson sort of sniffs the air, and the acting actually carries off that the Eye of Orion is the most tranquil place in the universe, even though it's unfortunately, because it's clearly the same place as the Death Zone, because they weren't going to be able to film somewhere else. They've done their best, but actually, yeah, I mean, you'd perhaps want to go for a different kind of vibe. But Earth Under a Thunderstorm, I think when I was younger, I sort of went, no, okay, that seems to me like quite a grown-up way of enjoying, tranquility and all of that. So even though, yeah, it just looks like they've got up to film really early in the morning. I remember watching this with some friends many years later. So, oh gosh, yes, because I had some university friends of mine on Doctor Who anniversaries let me have a sort of Doctor Who party and indulged me and watched stuff with me. God, I've been so lucky with my friends. I've always had a bit of a persecution complex, and I think people have actually been very kind to me over the years. But I remember a friend of mine who's now a really very successful actor watched this bit with the first Doctor and went, is that supposed to be him running? And I was like, oh, come on, mate, it's an old man. So that was the first sight of Richard Hurndall, who for me is an excellent first Doctor. I don't sort of think of him in terms of William Hartnell, because I'd seen An Unearthly Child when it was repeated as part of the Five Faces of Doctor Who. But so what Hurndall did was perfectly first Doctorish to me. A slightly waspish old man, and I think he does a perfectly good job. And I think he's been, he's sort of been slightly damned latterly for not being like William Hartnell. Now that we're all, au fait with what William Hartnell was like, but as an image of what William Hartnell was, he was great for me. But to be fair to people who remembered William Hartnell, they might have a very different perspective, and that's perfectly fair enough. This is really weird. We've got a cheese plant that looks like it's the shadow of the cheese plant on the table. From where I'm watching here, it's like a sort of echo. One plant is pretty much the same as the other in my real life and on the screen. Anyway, what is on the screen? This is Ray Float. He works under a different name now. I think he does some comedy or something, because somebody showed me a flyer for something and said, who's this guy? He says he's been in Doctor Who, and it took us ages to work it out. Then we worked out, oh no, it's that guy who was that part. I think John Levine was offered and went, no way. So I do like the fact that Colonel Crichton is played by David Saville, who was Lieutenant Carstairs in The War Games, Patrick Troughton's last story. I'm sure that was an accident, but it's a nice bit of casting, and I like David Saville as an actor. I've never had the pleasure. I think I'm told he had his fingers burnt at a convention where I think they were ripped off or something, and so took a dim view of Doctor Who and its fandom. But I believe he started to send signed photos back in the post now. Don't like it. So this is interesting that it's all shot on film as well. Bit of whiskey and Doctor Who as well. Drinking in the afternoon, but that all seems very grown up. I love Troughton in this. Troughton and Nicholas Courtney in this. And I like David Saville, actually. He doesn't do very much in this, but he does a very good job. Who? Of course you want one of those. Of course you want one of those. It would have been a bit of a waste. I can understand why John Levine didn't want to do that. And also it would have mucked up the continuity of Mordred Undead. And of course, when you were younger, you didn't know, because we'd only just got the 20th anniversary special and Doctor Who Celebration. I'm talking about my generation here. I didn't know if the Terrible Zodin was actually a thing or not. Was that an adventure that the Doctor had? Because you had to piece together your Doctor Who history. Without any of the resources of today. And I have to say, I think it was a bit more fun. but that's always an old man's thing, isn't it? We had things harder than you, so it was better. I'm sure it's lovely if you're a young fan now and you want to go, I want that thing. Can I see it? I love the way that Patrick Troughton runs. He runs brilliantly. And I love the music as well. I mean, I could. There was a time when, I mean, every single facial expression or musical sting, I could. I could anticipate every line. Boo, tick, 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 tick. I like the tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. It's a musical score that is very, very evocative to me, and I like the fact that it has all those sort of echoes of the theme. This needs to be, this needs to, echo the past, and it does. Now here's Pertwee on Pertwee Corner. One of the nice. I've been to this corner of road, and one of the nicest thing. I think the nicest thing might be the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. My now ex-wife. And I was reminded of this very recently when I was going through some old videos, and I actually texted her, and she'd forgotten all about it. And I said, well, it was a really nice thing to do, so I just wanted to say thanks. She, on Doctor Who's 48th or 49th, we'd split up by the 50th, so maybe it must have been the 48th. Just took me out on the 23rd of November, and we went for a drive, and she stopped the car and she said, right, where are we? And I went, what? And I felt enormous pressure because I didn't want to spoil what she'd obviously gone to such great effort. But I thought, what? But she'd given me no context at all. And then I went, hang on, is this the corner that John Pertwee gets kidnapped in the Five Doctors? And she went, oh, I'm so pleased you knew that. And she'd arranged a little road trip. She'd got, we lived in London. She'd got Richard Bignell's locations book and had a flick through, and her friend was looking at houses in Denham at the time, so I think she'd had a chance to do a little recce, and she'd worked out where we could go in Denham, and there was Pertwee Corner, there was Unit HQ, as we've seen as well, from the 3 and 5 Doctors. She didn't take me to Sarah Jane's house, but we went to the line of poplar trees from the Reign of Terror. We went to the bypass from Legopolis, and I just think, because she'll have got nothing, I just think as a pure nice thing to do for somebody, and obviously we've split up now and there was lots of sadness and all of that, I remember that with great fondness, and I acknowledge that as a rather wonderful thing that she did for me, God bless her. Sarah Jane's got a funny old dress sense, hasn't she? This is a very curious see-through anorak thing that she's got going on. Nice house she's got though, isn't it? That'll be worth a tidy packet these days. But this was a great time to be a Doctor Who fan. Beware of the dog. I mean, there are so many wonderful touches here. Even as a kid, I sensed there was something wrong here. I don't know why. I didn't know. I didn't get Doctor Who magazine or anything at this time. I mean, I occasionally got one if I was on holiday or something. But I knew that Tom Baker... I got Eagle comic, and they'd had a picture, a publicity picture for the 5 Doctors. And it had said, can you spot the difference or something? And it said, Richard Herndl is playing the first Doctor, William Hartnell, but he's not the only imposter in this picture. Can you guess why? And the answer was, it's a waxwork of Tom Baker because he was unavailable when the photo was taken. So there was... And I don't know, I think I've always been sort of pretty good at spotting, I don't know, sort of telly things. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, I had an instinct for this, that this was not quite right. And maybe it was just, and I hadn't quite understood that they looked the age. But I don't remember thinking, oh, they look younger than they should. It was more the quality of the film or something to do with the production, and because I certainly didn't. I don't think it certainly wasn't. Oh, they're in Cambridge. This must be footage from Sharda. I wouldn't have known that, but I did know of Sharda. Anyway, I think it's considering the hand that they were dealt, I think this is ingenious. I mean, this is what I love about Doctor Who, is that, it's like life. It's littered. I mean, the fact that he drops the pole and that's when he gets taken off is, and then of course they're not there because they've gone under the bridge, so that's your cut. I mean, it's ingenious. It's not quite as, it doesn't make quite so much sense at the end. But, like life, they're dealt a series of disasters, like my life, and they sort of, and then something just about comes together to just sort of make it work. But as I say, even as a youngster, I had a sense that was slightly detached from the main thing. I love Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith. This cut doesn't quite work. I think the triangle needs to get there a bit quicker, but I'm nitpicking. I only say that because I remember thinking it at the time. Now it's going to be hard to choose the 5 favourite things as well, because normally it's episode by episode, but this is all as part of a chunk. We could have watched it in because it was repeated during the day many years later, and I was delighted that the bit where the Master walks down the stairs was the cliffhanger to the third. I know people sort of knock that and go, it's not a very good cliffhanger, but I remember thinking, I hope that's the cliffhanger. I don't know, I just thought it would fit neatly, and it did. So yeah, being a fan at this time was extraordinary, and of course I think the only time I've seen this version in goodness knows how long, because I got the souped up version when I was a student, and I couldn't afford many videos in those days. I bought that one, and I bought the War Machines because I felt I should contribute to the range when I could, especially if they'd done something special. And the War Machines, they'd inserted some missing footage and gone to a bit of effort to clean it up, and the 5 Doctors, they'd got this special edition. So I watched the special edition for ages, and then when the 5 Doctors came out on DVD, this version had a commentary from David Tennant, Phil Collinson, and Helen Rayner. I can't believe I'm now plucking that out of the ether as a nostalgic thing, but I remember watching that, and that was at a time when you go, wow, the actual Doctor is doing a commentary on an old Doctor Who. And there's a much more protracted entrance for Barusa in the special edition, I remember. And it's really weird because so even when I revisited this, it was at a really special time to be a Doctor Who fan, when the current production team are celebrating the old Who, and we got I just remember at that time when it came out, Doctor Who was in its ascendancy. I was in a temporary house when that happened, but so I remember that's where I watched Journey's End and The Stolen Earth. So it was that kind of period I remember watching that stuff, and that was at a time when Doctor Who was all over the place again. So even when this wasn't current, its release and my sort of revisit of it, even though it was only watching it with the commentary, was at a time when Doctor Who was all over the place again, and it seemed amazing. And I think I was just starting to see who then became that wife. It's funny, I've just talked over the scene between the 3 Time Lords where they actually say the lines. I didn't point this out. I think is it Nick Pegg or somebody in Doctor Who magazine pointed out that actually their delivery of the lines makes no sense. The bit about the members of the council are unanimous. The Castellan says it as a full stop, which he's not supposed to. Actually, if you examine what the lines are on the paper and the way that they're delivered, they're actually wrong. They don't make sense of the lines. It's most peculiar. Philip Latham has a wonderful sort of cadaverous thing going on, doesn't he? And that sort of nasal delivery. I remember being a bit disappointed it wasn't Leonard Sachs, because I like things to be the same. Having seen Arc of Infinity many times since, I'm not sure Leonard Sachs would have stayed awake for the whole of the 5 Doctors, and I don't think he certainly couldn't have carried on what the part requires in this. This is a lovely little echo. I mean, it sort of makes no sense. That's a beautiful shot. The shadow. Surely it's Susan. I love the because in the book. I remember in the book, which I didn't get before it was this came out, although it was out before, wasn't it? So some people got to read it soon. I think I was given a copy of the book, but one of the extra scenes was Susan getting kidnapped. But actually, I quite like the economy. The shadowy lighting and work in this is terrific, and I mean, I actually love the fact that this story is not much of a story. It's basically, you get your characters, you plonk them in deadly situations. They have to walk through a load of deadly situations to get to the end, and then they meet up and it ties up. I have absolutely no problem with that. It gives you all the little grace notes, and it gives you, the master walks in and you're almost pleased to see him, and I do like Ainley's conduct in front of the High Council. It's not really a High Council, it's three people. Oh yes, two of the High Council went into the zone. I wonder. So would they really send Chancellor Thalia in? And Cardinal Zorak. I mean, can you imagine? He wouldn't have wanted to step into any of the puddles. I do like Paul Jericho as the Castellan, by the way. I was very pleased to see him return. I'd found him very memorable. He's very like a cat. That description of him being like a treasure cat, that sort of ghost of a smile that he has, and that sort of slight chewy thing he does, like he's got a bit of gristle trapped beneath his wisdom teeth. But he has those wonderful sort of cat-like eyes. This is a performance of a certain type, and I'm afraid he's beaten for me in the Master Stakes by Delgado every time, even though he was my first master. But I do enjoy him. I actually think I prefer him now to then. And rescue the Doctor. I love the way he does that sort of thing with his mouth and his eyes. They sparkle. He is good casting as the master. It's a very simple effect, that, isn't it? But it's good. It's very effective. So the 20th anniversary. I wonder if I'd have been as big a fan as I am if I hadn't been born when I was, because it wasn't just watching this. It was, it was the archaeology. It was all the stuff that. I remember the Doctor Who, a celebration book, sort of being passed around at the Christmas that I was given it. I was given it that Christmas, 83, and the rest of the family looking, go, oh, did you know he's never actually been called Doctor Who on screen? And think, oh, it started the day after Kennedy was assassinated, and it's the family sort of shared in, because it was a shared language, because they'd grown up with it. My brothers had watched it as kids. My sister not so much, I don't think, but there was never any suggestion it was a sort of geeky thing. Obviously, I'd gone further with it than everybody, but it was I loved the fact that it was something that sort of everybody knew and everyone had an angle on, and people actually found interesting. I think I've suffered from that since, because them looking at that book and going, oh, this is interesting, has meant that I've shouted out facts when perhaps people weren't quite so interested. I noticed that Dalek's midsection had a bit broken off it. There we go. But that was. This was the most exciting thing in the world, seeing the Dalek mutant and a load of pouring gunk. This was $1 million. This stuff. Yeah. And there we go. The black. Great piece of music. It's, as I say, this is the sort of soundtrack that lies in the tower. And here we are. Charming spot. I love the fact that these two have such they have all the best lines actually, and it's funny because Troughton is so good with Sergeant Benton in The Three Doctors. He's so good with the Brigadier here, and every time he's sort of denied the companion he was supposed to have, because he'd have had a great time with Jamie, because him and Fraser Hines are superb together. But the Brigadier is really Pertwee's guy. I love the way he pats him on the shoulder. He said, "Don't worry, Brigadier, and well done for the metal sound." Well done for the metal sound. As he hits the thing with his hand, but but Troughton and the Brigadier is a really, really good combination. Elizabeth Sladen has another unfortunate, because she looks there like somebody's poked her up the bum and she's fallen, and then this was the cliffhanger to part one when it was shown during the day. Was it on consecutive afterwards? I can't remember, but I remember catching this repeat that was it seemed like the Five Doctors was everywhere. Being the one I'd been really sore to miss, I actually then couldn't miss it for ages and ages and ages. Not that I minded, but that's why it was so familiar to me, and why I actually wasn't in much of a hurry to get it on video subsequently, because I'd seen it so many times until the special edition came out. So I didn't even have that VHS that Chris wangled at the top of this, but this is one of the least successful elements of this, where you read the book and Sarah's dangling on the edge of a cliff. Here she's clearly just fallen down a curbside and made quite a meal of it. He didn't need to pull her up that in rope, did he? He just needed to sort of lean over. It's not even a ledge, Doctor. But anyway, that I think is one of the sort of funnier shortcomings of this. It doesn't really matter, and they've tried their best, but it doesn't work. But I love all of this. I love Terence Dicks's dialogue that he gives everybody, actually. Teeth occurs, and yes, thank you very much for rescuing me, Doctor. Need rescue. Oh, it's such a good line, and she does it beautifully. She's so pitch perfect. I love. I mean, at this time, I was pretty keen on marrying Elizabeth Sladen / Sarah Jane Smith. I bet she wouldn't have taken me round on a trip round. This is one of those bits where I think they brought that rock with them, didn't they? But this is great. It's completely flat landscape. And she's going to do that thing, isn't she, where she's going to spot the TARDIS, which is directly in front of them. They haven't had to look round a corner. They've been walking towards that for the whole time, but they haven't seen it because it's not in shot. And I think it's quite a smart move of the two to hook up early, is first and fifth, partially because it's not the real first. So fans of the genuine article, as it were, still have to wait till the end for the Doctors as they remember them or whatever. Although Terence Dicks has a much better idea than because I believe in Robert Holmes's version, he was going to sort of explain why the first Doctor wasn't the first Doctor. I think in the sort of pre-video age, I think it was absolutely fine to just go, this is the first Doctor. I knew it wasn't the same actor, but I was fine with it. I like Davison's reaction. Do you know what? I never understood 4th, 5 have been out. It seemed unnecessarily complicated to me why 4th meant there were 5, and it means absolute sense now. But as a kid, I was stumped by that. The original. Yeah, I love it. Yes, and yes, I've never quite understood why the earlier, the later Doctor, i.e. the older Doctor, Davison is older than Hartnell, sort of defers to his younger self, who is older. But it's fine. I like Mark Strickson does so many good little bits in this, and I didn't really get to see much of season 20. I didn't really know Turlough except by what I'd been told about him, and his sort of thank you where he does up the button, and his big isn't it that he does later. I mean, he's largely sidelined in this story, and yet he manages to invest most of what he does with that sort of peevish weirdness that he does that is really good. I think is really watchable. I love Turlough. I think he's a great character. I think it was an interesting idea to have the companion that wants to kill the Doctor. Oh yes, I think Dinah Sheridan had to stand very still for ages there while they did that crossfade. And now we wait. Yeah, Philip Latham's great casting. I didn't know him at the time. It was because John Nathan Turner held great store in the Pallisers. It was very much a resource that he plundered for big name casting. Whereas, I mean, I don't think even my mum particularly remembered the Pallisers, but it was one that was in John Nathan Turner's fantasy TV listings. The Pallisers was right up there. I'm not sure I've ever seen it. Troughton is so good. He's sort of funny and scary at the same time. To the tower, to Rassilon. Love them. What does he say? Is that where he lives? Not exactly Brigadier. It's his tomb. I love that, and I love the way he sort of bashes it on the arm, and the way he scampers about. And I could watch those two forever. Oh yes, I think I'd thought the Master stood on that corpse. He didn't. He stopped. Good, because just as he was about to do it, I thought, please don't tell me he treads on that dead person's ribcage. Councillor Zorak's ribcage. Is this the pineapple scene? There's some pineapple that gets slightly mangled in the eating. Never act with children, animals, or bits of pineapple when you've got false teeth. I do like his mittens as well, his fingerless mittens. I love the way that they've all got fruits. I thought they were going to go make a cup of tea, and they've got a whacking great load of fruit salad. Davison is so good as well, and it's quite right that he takes sort of centre stage, because that's interesting. It was supposed to be Tom Baker that went to Gallifrey, and that would have slightly upset the balance, and I think the incumbent Doctor has to be, the star. And it must be quite a thing to sort of wrangle the different egos. It's a testament to the show. I remember reading a couple of reviews in Doctor Who magazine from, I think maybe it was Gary Russell. Gary was disappointed with Pertwee in this. And obviously, Pertwee was before my time. So again, this was, I'd seen The Three Doctors and Carnival of Monsters. I thought Pertwee was great in this. I really enjoyed him. I thought he looked good. I mean, he carries himself so well, and that outfit is ridiculous. But somehow, I mean, he's just got such natural elegance. He wears it well, and he knows how to. He's a natural with that car. It's all such good casting. Those Doctors. They all just seem so right to me as a youngster. Improvise. I had to ask my mum what that meant. Yeah, and it's I mean, I don't know why the Death Zone's got roads, but it doesn't matter. A lot of this does look like it's filmed on a really cold early morning, doesn't it? They all look slightly, that really sort of cold nose you have first thing. I remember for age. I'm sure somebody for ages. I know there were some fans who thought, because he says Jehoshaphat, that was the Master's name. My best enemy. Whereas, I just assumed Jehoshaphat was a thing you said, like you bounder or whatever. It's there in the delivery. He's not going, hello, Jim, or whatever the master's name is. But yes, I remember that being a thing for a while where some people thought the master was called Jehoshaphat. You don't hear phrases like arrant nonsense anymore. Um, and they didn't get on, did they? The Ainley and Pertwee, I think, didn't Pertwee didn't did Pertwee give Ainley notes? Yeah, that's right. I know it's the wrong way. Um, oh yes, and I quite like the fact that the master is actually guiltless in a lot of this. He is genuinely trying to help. Those laser beams have got absolutely nothing to do with him. He looks great running in that cloak as well. That cloak's excellent. It really works. Especially as he must have found it on the death zone. Unless, because he transmatted in without it. But the corpse he found had a cloak on as well. Maybe there's some sort of cloakroom when you land in the death zone. So it's a bit chilly. You are on location now. And on film. That's nice, little bit of economy as well. You go, okay, it's been zapped and it's left. Poor old Bessie is left smoking, but we've had Bessie. This chap's called don't know anything about him, Stephen Meredith or something. You sort of go, it must be, and I don't think he's done all that much, but it must be sort of what acting did you do? Oh well, I mean, I was in only the biggest episode of Doctor Who up to that point. Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Paul Jericho has a lovely sort of direct, terse, snidey quality that I found really watchable. He was a really memorable character for me as a kid, the Castellan. I've since had the pleasure of meeting Paul a few times. And in fact, we share a voiceover agent. In fact, we were on the same voiceover job, but we didn't actually meet. We didn't do it together, but then we were edited together. But I've since had the pleasure of meeting with him, and he's a very nice fella. And much more sort of jovial and jolly than those sort of nasal, snidey characters he does so well. But he does brilliant stuff with his hands. I like the bit when he's, when they go to escort him out and touch his arms, and he holds his hands up as if to say, "Don't touch me, I'm the Castellan." I like all of that sort of stuff that he does. Trouton's face. He bashes him on the shoulder. Come on, Brigadier. And it's a map painting, isn't it, that? But you wouldn't know. I think the tower on the horizon is a terrific piece of work. And yes, having the story set on Gallifrey, I think, is probably pretty ripe for the time. Although Gallifrey, became a sort of place of diminishing returns, really. I also, I have to say, I really liked Tegan's. Oh, this is where he fails to eat some pineapple. Oh no, it's actually not as bad as I remembered. No, that's okay. No, he did that. He's just eating it like an old man. I remember as a kid, it seemed like he had terrible trouble with that. I love the way that she has such a perky and interesting way of delivering her lines, Elizabeth Sladen. I'm always returned to what Barry Letts said about her audition, where she was, lots did scared, lots did brave. She did scared and brave, and she does just do a little twist on the line to make it seem not like acting, more interesting than normal dialogue, and yet somehow human. And it's called. He's quite gloomy and. Oh yes, this is where it says, well, two of them got through. Wonder what happened to the other me. What happened to the other?
Well, so two of them made it. I wonder what happened
to the other. Oh dear, he's very grim, isn't he? He wasn't very well when he made this Hurndl, and he actually died not that long later. I've actually held a letter from him that he wrote from his hospital bed in order to provide a recipe for the Doctor Who cookbook. And bless him, he's how sweet of him. He was actually a terrific actor, Hurndl. I've seen him in some earlier stuff, and he's in a thing called Spindo. It's got brilliant performances from people like Anthony Baton, Ray McAnally, and he's the villain in that, and he's in a great Steptoe & Son episode. Really good actor. Oh, and he's in Enemy at the Door. He's a really good actor, Hurndl. I love, yes, the are you in pain, Doctor? And I'm singing the song, and does it help considerably more than you do? I mean, every line, every exchange between the Brigadier and the Second Doctor is a joy. Terence Dicks is well loved for us for being a great script editor and a marvellous, the name on the spines of most of our target books. I don't think he actually gets enough credit for his writing. We love Robert Holmes's lines, and Robert Holmes is great at dialogue. But actually, Terence Dicks, and we love Terence Dicks because he was Terence Dicks. Oh, I love the Cyber Scout who comes and goes, "Oh, yeah." They cut that out of the special edition, and I thought that was bad. And I have found the ones from the TARDIS. That's William Kenton, who I've discovered since I did my last year in memoriam video, has recently, or last year, or anyway, has died. William Kenton, the Cyber Scout, who gets he's an actor as opposed to an extra because he has the one line. And then here we have the regular two, Mark Hardy and David Banks, who I think are superb as the cyber leader and the cyber lieutenant. I love the sort of robotic body language that they do that isn't quite, body popping or what it isn't like the sort of street performers that you see, but it has enough about it of sort of jerky roboticness, not without drawing too much attention to itself. I like Davison's thing about like Alice, I tried to believe 3 impossible things before breakfast. This is a lovely exchange between the two of them. And I love the fact that Teague. I mean, look how far. David Banks even stands on a hill well. But yeah, a bit like the TARDIS in the other shot, the Cybermen have been coming for miles. I love this bit. Yes, after you, and I love the cyber gun effect and the explosion, and that bangs him on the head. Oh, I love that sequence. I remember that bit, and of course he can't leave the Master. This confused me because I thought he was picking up the recall device, although you can see it clearly now. But what he means is the Master's been hit on the head by a rock. But I wasn't quite sure about that as a kid, I have to say. Seems blindingly obvious now. I love that whole sequence, and that little bit of red light on Davison as he goes. And and yes, this, like the hillock, is not the finest hour for anybody involved, where poor old Susan has to... I mean, you can almost go, she does do twisted ankle acting excellently, but you could say she's probably had a lot of practice, although I don't think it happens that often. But it's... oh, I love the way he goes to press the thing and it's not there. You could say it's Terence having a sense of humour going, twist the ankle, but it is the Master... The Master's improvising very, very quickly. Well done, the Master. But yeah, Terence Dicks is loved by us for many reasons, but his scripts all have such good, funny lines in that aren't, I think, quite as... Perhaps... I don't know, perhaps they're not quite as embedded in sort of literary tradition as Holmes, who I think wrote sort of literary spoofery very well. So we kind of recognised it, but it was sort of quite grand and quite eloquent and sometimes very darkly funny. But I think Terence Dicks's dialogue for the characters and interaction and banter between the pairings that he does in this is superb. Interestingly, in the book, where the first Doctor says, "Oh well, if you must," I think he actually smiles and says, "Oh yes, lovely dear." I wonder why that was changed. Maybe somebody thought that the first Doctor was being a bit harsh with poor old Tegan. It, I mean, Philip Latham does seem a bit like a villain, and you couldn't imagine John Arnott. Or I actually think it's a shame that the villain is Barusa. It's one of those things that I try to forget because I love Angus Mackay and John Arnott in The Deadly Assassin and Invasion of Time, and I think it's sad that that this Barusa turns out to be the bad guy. I can see why Terrance Dicks did it, and it's all about the rottenness at the heart of the society that pretends that it's the universe's protector, but it's as corrupt as anything. It's quite a basic framing, this as well. Presumably they all had a meeting, and it wasn't just like, right, Castellan, you're entirely responsible for the recall circuit, so you're the only person that did he build it as well? But it's and I remember being no, he's not guilty. Oh, has he got a pierced ear? God, that looks cold, doesn't it? It's wonderful, the mist, though. But the Cybermen are all quite short, because the Cybermen on film are all hired locally, and I don't think they got them quite as tall as they could have done. But it's great that the Master, improvises his way into the Cybermen's, not affection, but gang. And yes, and that third one there is William Kent and the Cyber Scout. So that that's quite nice of the director to say you don't have to stand on the hill with the extras. You can he got to say leader. He got an extra bit. Aliens are not to be trusted. Yeah. I do like these Cybermen, and when you're on location, it's obvious the Cybermen are going to have to be the main villains. But it was nice that we got a Dalek early on. I love all that sort of fist. I love all that fisties. I love a good cyber fisting. So poor old Susan and Turlough are now just sort of stuck in the TARDIS. But I remember at the time it didn't seem like that was a problem. This, because it's total. What should we do with these guys? Not an awful lot. But actually, I think at the time that was the second cliffhanger of the Sunday afternoon version. May not have been a Sunday. Cybermen around the TARDIS. So actually, yes, what I was just about to call a very perfunctory bit was a dramatic high point. I've always felt a little bit disappointed that you didn't really see the Yeti here. Lee Woods, I think, is the extra who plays the Yeti. He's no longer with us either. But the Raston Warrior robot. I mean, is there a I was going to say a more unforgettable sequence? Can you have more unforgettable? Yeah, you can. I get vertigo. They don't get tired. Yeah, I love that. Yes, because of course the rest of Warrior Robot is new. So as having you have the old monsters that all turn up to do their bit, but actually I think it's pretty impressive that the most memorable sequence is as part of a creature created just for this, and it's a brilliant. It's just a man in a silver suit it's just a man dressed as a cyber android and sprayed silver, basically. It jumps in the air in a quick cut, and it's Keith Hodiak, who I had the pleasure of interviewing. He's a dancer. He's also in Full Metal Jacket. Lovely fella. And he was in some of the Chronicles of Narnia as well, I think. That's a fantastic shot of the reflection of the Cyberman in the water. I do like this location. I know there's always a joke about Doctor Who being shot in a slate quarry, but I think it's a fantastic location. Freeze, Sarah Jane. If you move, we're dead. I remember quoting that at school. That was, this sequence coming up. And kindly refrain from addressing me as Doc. I loved all it. See, it's just, I mean, nothing's happening. They're just all walking towards the tower. Stuart Blake here as the commander turns up in the very next story as Skibbus the Silurian. And he's also been in, he'd been in State of Decay. The Black Scrolls of Rassilon. I remember thinking this was a great effect. And, I mean, well, I'm not sure it bears much scrutiny how these work. So you have these scrolls. What's on them? Why do they catch fire now? Has the Castellan never opened them? Does he just have them as a keepsake? That casket before. I remember I was in a thing called Cyberman 2 for Big Finish, and I had a line something like, I have never seen that bomb before. That's the great bit of hand acting that he does. I love that. This followed by not such a good piece. What?
No, not the mind's probe.
Yeah, it doesn't work there, and I feel a bit sorry for him, and it's a killer of a line. But it's also glorious and wonderful. I remember he dies with his eyes open. I remember, this was actually because he'd been in it before.
Was that really necessary? Well, as you can see, he was armed and trying to escape.
This was a big move. It's getting to the point in the drama where there needs to be, a sacrifice, and it seems like, for the plot, the Doctor's find his traitor, even though it's made pretty clear that the Doctor thinks that that's not the case. But that we've sacrificed somebody who at least we have, some sort of, we have a bit of history with the Castellan, and even though he's only been in Arc of Infinity, I knew the Castellan of old, says Davison. They sell the whole thing about the importance of the character, and I think Paul Jericho has enough presence to make us feel that loss as well. So he comes in for a bit of stick because of No, Not the Mind Probe. I actually think he's really good, and none of them say those lines properly in that first scene. But I really like he's got a great voice, and as I say, that sort of great testy sort of terse thing going on. But I still don't know how the Black Scrolls of Rassilon work. And they catch fire because you're not supposed to read them, so they're hardly incriminating evidence. And where did he get anyway? But it's just sort of stuff in it. I was a bit sad that you didn't get to see the Yeti. You see it sort of hand, and I don't care that the Great Intelligence isn't there. You find a reason, because anything that was an echo of the past. This, although of course, the bad side of this is, Doctor Who. I mean, season 20 had that, I think, retrospectively put into it of it's every story's got something from the past. But Doctor Who did start to eat itself a little bit, and series have to be careful of that. And that, I think that partially goes towards explaining why. Very quickly after this, I mean, Ed Stradling makes a very good case on the Warriors of the Deep DVD that, 5 Doctors, Doctor Who was everywhere, all these anniversary things, blah, 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 blah. And then it came back, and Warriors of the Deep was the first story everybody saw after the 20th anniversary. And it's got, a pantomime sea dragon and blah, 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 blah. And was the, and that was where Doctor Who sort of started to spiral downhill in the public consciousness, and I think that there's a convincing case to be made there. It's a galactic glitter. I love Troughton having all those things in his pockets. Again, just another little touch of where there's a wind, there's a way. Is that actually a saying? You could. This is me heckling myself from the future. It's a play on where there's a will, there's a way. You idiot. Only just realised that. Anyway, back to the galactic glitter is presumably some sort of space firework, but it's just a firework. If there had been 4 Doctors, would there have been above, between, below, and through the pantry? How would that have worked? I don't know. But again, it's just neat. And this is brilliant as well. After you bring it in, I mean, that's... I love that. But I mean, that's terrible, because they're essentially saying, oh, it's a bit scary in there, but I'll send you in first. But yes, I think these two do a great job with this, because it is kind of... I mean, we do lots of sort of cutting back to... Well, there's no plot, really. There's not much of a plot, is there? You know, it's just... You can't spend too much time with all of the characters. So I think Terrance Dicks very artfully balances everybody's contribution. And it is a bit of a shame for Carol Ann Ford and Mark Strickson that they spend most of it in the TARDIS, although at least Carol Ann Ford got to go out and twist her ankle. So he does, you know... I love all of this. Oh my God, there was nothing better as a kid. I could have watched this, I think I did actually, I could have watched this over and over again. And it's for the most part an excellent sequence. I mean, you have to kind of take on... I love it when the arm comes off and then the arm stiffens on the floor, doesn't it? The hand, that again, this was Hollywood stuff for a kid brought up on Doctor Who. And you had to slightly go, well, obviously this is happening slightly quicker than I expect it to, because why aren't any of these guys doing anything now? And it's because he can move at the speed of light, you know, but it's slightly slowed down for us. That's how I rationalise it. Cyber sick, is he going to do the sick milk thing? Yeah, love that. I mean, yeah, I think that sequence was just so exciting. All this sort of cyber death. I've got that picture on a postcard, or actually as an official photograph, I think, of the Cyberman blowing up into flames. I like the fact that he's got a little larder. Well, no, he's got a little shed with his spare bits, knocking his head off. I mean, glorious. And I think in the special edition, doesn't he jump and vanish? I quite like that as a coda to the scene. I met Dinah Sheridan when she was very, very old, with her daughter Jenny Hanley, but she was... Yeah, I don't have any stories, really. I mean, I was just in a room with her, really. But I had the pleasure of being in her orbit, which is one of those things I must remember, that I've had the pleasure of meeting all sorts of Doctor Who folks. Yes, I don't quite work out how the Raston robot keeps all of his bits and bobs, but anyway, what a splendid idea. And he's so good at just the way that he has a penknife and gets that wire open. He's very handy, Pertwee. You can imagine him, getting down and dirty with an engine and knowing what to do, or he's just very capable. He makes sort of, I don't know what an entry coder is. I mean, I assume it's that, but the way she says it is this: if it's a sequence of words, entry coder, that I should know. And I'm not sure that I do. There's a few phrases like that in this where, as a kid you thought, am I supposed to know? I'm assuming I'm supposed to know what that means. Then as you get older, you go, I still don't really know. I mean, I sort of, I get gist of what it is, but it's not. I've never come across the phrase entry coder since. That's a very good model. I quite like this touch. I had a friend who really hated it because he said, "Oh, it's crap. Why is the it's crap that it dies just before it could do anything." I'm like, no, I quite like the fact that it's just an extra bit of drama. He slightly fluffs the line here, doesn't he? But this is on film, so this is a nice set, and it means that it matches with the location stuff very nicely. Don't look down, Sarah. There we go. Oh, isn't she brilliant? It's not quite that sort of melding of the tower onto the location is not brilliant, but it's a brave stab. They do a pretty good job of it, but it's not. Yeah, you can see the join, as it were. Through here, which is a door. Look, there we go. Does she do a funny little... She does, doesn't she? She does a funny little thing because her performance is full of joyous, funny little things. I like big, isn't it? I do like Turlough. Mark Strickson is another performer who does lovely, funny little things. I have no idea how this works, and yet as a kid I absolutely adored it. And all that, as easy as pie, as easy as pie. What an extraordinary fellow! But I've got no idea how this. This doesn't work at all. Yeah, there we go. Boom. Clackle, 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 clackle. Oh yes, because of course it's diabolical ingenuity. Yes. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. Now it's a nice line though, actually. This is another bit where the Cybermen have to be a little bit blind not to notice. But again, I just sort of, as a kid, I just sort of went, well, I'm aware, it's to do with the staging of it. We have to see the Cybermen. But yeah, actually, I think I was very generous as a kid. That's yeah. But again, this is, the Cybermen are just cannon fodder in this. Yes, and it was my introduction to pi. I think I knew there was a Greek letter pi, but I didn't quite know how it worked in maths. I've never been good at maths anyway. But I thought that is easy as pie and the pi thing was absolutely ingenious as a kid. But he doesn't even try to, what's he doing? What's he doing with pi here? He's literally just walked across the chessboard. Is he thinking about pi? Is he transmitting? Is he going 3.124 blah 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 blah? It's absolute nonsense. But what it is loads of Cybermen being zapped to bits on a chessboard. And it's glorious. It sort of doesn't matter, but it bears no scrutiny whatsoever. David Banks is very good. His word is worth his weight in gold. He's sort of, you betrayed us. He's not accusatory there particularly. There's a kind of, why did you do that? It's not quite logical. He is really good value as the cyber leader. I think he's a great asset to the show and to the Cybermen themselves, as evidenced by the way that he dies. Actually, this is a fantastic death when he does the kind of oh no, is it an earth shock then that he does the death where he sort of grips onto the Doctor and hits the floor? He gets a better death in Earth, but he's even does deaths well. Now, when the Master said that, I was like, did they used to drive sheep across minefields? That sounds awful. So he introduced quite some horrible concepts as a kid. But what is this? I mean, he didn't even touch every row then. How? But he's done it 3 different times. Did they discuss this at rehearsal? As easy as pie. I love this bit. What an extraordinary... No, he didn't. He said it's as easy as pie. I'm sorry, I'm a bit like Matthew Waterhouse on a DVD coach here. I'm just quoting bits that I like. And of course, he had to... Poor old Richard Herndl had to be dubbed because he didn't quite get pie right when he did it the first time round. So I think there's a bit of ADR goes on. And in Midnight, which I invoked earlier, of course, David Tennant and Leslie Sharp get pie and have to say it in... Yeah. You couldn't tell at the time. You can tell there's a slight... A bit like the film from Sharda, that you can tell there's a slight change on ADR when the sound is slightly flatter. Anyway, but yes, in Midnight, David Tennant and Leslie Sharp have to get it right to various points. So I'm not blaming Richard Herndl, who was much older, for not getting it right, and no harm done. You don't. John Tallant's as the guard here. I don't know what's ever become of him. I hope he's well. Again, you got to be in the 5 Doctors, man. It's great.
Inform Chancellor Flavia that the Lord President has disappeared, would you?
But yes, I used to quote the "as easy as pie" bit, and as I say, as a kid, that seemed like such a clever. I don't know quite why the master has given him the solution and what the solution is, but now. Some people have said that this is daft because it's got the music on the painting, but I just kind of assumed, I know Davison just sort of glanced at it a couple of times, that you'd know what Rassilon was playing, and it's not that he's necessarily reading off the painting. Again, I thought having the harp, I was a kid, remember, I was 9 when this was on, having the harp, Chekhov's harp there meant that it was part of the solution. I remember thinking was sort of rather clever. Because it's, oh yes, well I did see the heart earlier, and Bruce did put his hands on it, and that's clever because it was there all the time. I like things that are written that make a kid feel, oh yeah, I could have sort of seen that coming, or even I did see that coming. Stuff that's there that's easy enough for a kid to get, or for a kid to at least acknowledge. When there's so much that you sort of don't quite understand, because it has to be, you have to. I didn't understand a lot of Doctor Who when I was this age, because you take a lot of it on trust. And this was exciting, even though I didn't know Liz or Mike Hayes. I still find it slightly odd that Richard Franklin and Caroline John and Wendy Padbury and Fraser Hines are in this, because I sort of don't think they are really, except of course they are. And it's lovely that these actors return, but it's also quite odd to think they come in to do like half a dozen lines and then vanish. I don't think of Caroline John returning to Doctor Who at all, but she did, and Richard Franklin. As I say, I don't think in my head of Caroline John coming back to Doctor Who after season 7, and yet there they are. And it was odd because I didn't know those characters. I'd never seen those characters in action. I sort of felt we didn't quite see enough of them, and they didn't quite look like they did in the pictures. And but I wonder how it was for the people. It's a good model, that, isn't it? And I love the fact it's still got the Doctor's rope. That's a nice attention to detail. He walks with a cane very well, doesn't he? He carries himself very well, Herndl, and I like the way that he does that. He does the stuff about, can you feel forebodings? Nah, it's all nonsense. Nice green light on the stairs behind. little left, and this is a lovely bit of dramatic people because people. There's nothing here, Thomas. Then, of course, dramatic irony. The master comes down the stairs. People mock this because as he walks down the stairs, the music sort of accompanies his footsteps. But I remember that being the cliffhanger for the final, the final cliffhanger, the episode 3 cliffhanger of the repeat version, and being delighted that it had been, because I just liked that as a moment. I don't know why. I liked the dramatic irony, I think, of the. I wouldn't have used a pretentious phrase when I was 9, but I liked the idea. I liked the first Doctor saying, "Oh, everything's fine," and then the Master scampering down the stairs behind him. I spoke to Fraser Hines this morning, actually. Hello, Fraser. He very kindly suggested me for a job that I couldn't do. But he's still. I mean, he's very well preserved, is Fraser. I mean, he passes for, Jamie. And this is so sad. I really don't like the fact that in the War Games, Jamie and Zoe lose their memory. I don't know why that had to happen. But again, because I'd read the book, when the Doctor does this, I was like, oh, yes, of course. And I loved the fact that, again, it was something that I knew. You don't see Wendy Padbury at all, but I think it's because she's pregnant, isn't she? So she had to stand in the shadows with her bubble wrap coat. And again, I don't really think of Wendy Padbury returning to Doctor Who, but you barely get a look at her there, which I think's a real shame. I think she should have had a couple of decent close-ups. But I like how sad Troughton is when he goes, oh, shame. That sort of slight mournfulness that he does so well. Something he has in common with Sylvester McCoy as well, who has they both have a sort of, because they're both so sort of childish and actually sort of naturally quite funny and humorous looking, their mournful countenance is equally, I think, effective because of the contrast. They actually share that. But yes, I of course it makes no sense because they were taken away by the Time Lords and lost their memory in his last story. So unless, of course, so then you have to subscribe to the season 6B theory and all of that. But that's not really, let's be honest, that's not what Terrance Dicks was alluding to. This is stuff that we've all made up afterwards. Terrance was just using that as a nice piece of information for the Doctor to have at his disposal to realise that they were fakes. And I remember going, oh yeah, because I know that because I've read the War Games. But I still hate the fact that Zoe and Jamie lose their memories of the Doctor. It leaves a nasty taste in the mouth. But maybe it's supposed to, or maybe it's a metaphor for the missing episodes. That's a great shot of the big mausoleum of Rassilon. And here we start getting them all together, which is lovely. And everyone has to sort of stand around saying hello to each other. But I think Terrance Dicks has very skillfully managed to bring everybody together and to give everybody a fair slice of the action. I have to... the little fellow is perfectly all right. Go on, push them out of the way. Yeah. Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's a shame that Pertwee and the Brigadier don't get more to do with each other because they are, he was his Doctor. Typical. Oh yes, because Sarah says without a by your leave. I didn't know what that meant at the time either. That was by your leave. Yeah. But again, it's one of those phrases you don't really have now. But it was one of those ones that I sort of thought, I should know what that means really, but I'm sure I'll understand when I'm older. I love the way that the first Doctor. And it's respectful actually, even though he's still the youngest Doctor. The fact that it's him, Troughton's great. The way he winds up Pertwee, and I'm glad they got on in real life. They had good fun, didn't they? But they didn't, did they? In the Fortunately I Do, Everyone Does Together. I love that. They didn't. I think Troughton. Well, Pertwee found Troughton's working methods a bit tricky on the Three Doctors, because actually, Troughton was a consummate actor, whereas Pertwee had not, did not do electronic studio drama acting really prior to Doctor Who. And I think Mulder Coates was, certainly from a lot of people I've spoken to, was actually quite nervy, and for such a confident man on water skis and in a helicopter, actually and with dexterous voice work, but actually with the technique of actual acting, he was a little bit nervy and unsure of himself, and as often we do when we're nervy, unsure of ourselves, we cover that with front and bite and snark. So interesting. But actually, I think immortality. I like the way he does it. Oh, and I love the fact that the Brigadier. I remember being so pleased because the Brigadier seemed to me a sort of senior companion in a way, and I love the fact that it's him that's him that gets to punch the Master. Although Nicholas Courtney is actually not very good at punching. He doesn't like bending his arm for some reason. But anyway, that was actually quite well hidden. But I love the fact that it was the Brigadier. It has so many little bits that seem to me die. So many little bits that seemed just sort of perfect little grace notes that Terence Dicks sprinkles like a blooming expert. Now, is that... So So the way that he's acting it is that's supposed to be he's now reading that tune, whereas the way, and I always thought that picture of Rassilon, instead of him having a beard, it sort of looked like a skull. Looked like sort of there's no skin on his chops. But anyway, no, it's supposed to be that he's reading the tune. Oh well. This is great because I have to say I love the figurines on the thing. I love the fact that he's got a game and action figures, because that's part of the sort of enjoyment that he's having. But it's a great visual, and I mean within the confines of this story, one of the least surprising twists, I think. It's the nasally voiced skeleton man. Yes, because Paul Jericho's dead and it wasn't going to be Dinah Sheridan. There wasn't anybody else. I do like what Philip Latham does as particularly as the bad Barusa. He's got this, and he's very good at the sort of I'm made of mesmer. I can hold people with the force of my hand, but I'll give it a little shake. And he's got a great face for it. He's got those wonderful sunken cheeks, and he's got that sort of villainous kind of thing. Yeah, I really like Philip Latham in this. I think he's again, it's a sort of performance you can only kind of do in Doctor Who. That kind of stagey Shakespearean stuff, but there's a way of judging it, of making it not seem like it's too much. The timeless permission. Yeah, he's really sort of doing it, but he's not. There's an art to being sort of grandiose. I've reversed the polarity of the neutron flow. I've only just done the Sea Devils. I've done the two reverse the polarities of the neutron flows. I've not explained Latham very well. I think it's there's an art to. Yes, because of course they're supposed to be different. Because we've seen so many different Cybermen die. They've actually heightened the pitch of those cyber voices so that they don't all sound the same, because the only two that talk are the same two that talk all the way through. I love all the stuff that he does with his hands. And yeah, all of this stuff has its roots in the classical stage, I would say, which informed a lot of our television acting and sits very neatly within Doctor Who, because Doctor Who, I think is a synthesis of my two great loves, Shakespeare and stand-up comedy, in a way, in that you have to, it has the scope of, by making things universal. Which is what, Shakespeare tragedies aren't about, a bloke down the office getting divorced. They're about great things happening to great people, and therefore those things resonate into the very fabric of sort of, space and time, if you like. And that's sort of what you need. And there are lots of words that we don't quite understand, and Doctor Who has all of that sort of stuff, and it needs that kind of acting to match it. And he's really, I love the way that he does this, and I love the way that Davison goes, I'm not going to bow down. And a great hand and finger acting. I mean, it is quite arch, but I like it. And the music's really, I love that ticking clock music. I think he's really good, Latham. He's but odd, because I didn't really know him as an actor. I wonder now, you'd probably, but I mean, they can't have had an awful lot of money left for the guest cast. I remember being pleased that Troughton got to do the. I don't know why. I like the fact that Troughton got to do the telephone call. I love the way that there's also a villainous costume of Rassilon, in case you need one, with whacking great gloves. So I'm very nostalgic about this. I don't know what it must be like for those of you that sort of came afterwards, or even for those of you that were a bit older than me, where you'd got sort of different expectations. I'd only had Tom Baker, and I'd had the Five Faces of Doctor Who. So this was my so I'd seen the Crotons, and but to have these guys in sort of current Doctor Who, it felt great, and it felt, whenever, and the old days were seen as, certainly in my eyes, as the superior time, Now they're supposed to stand still here, but Nicholas Courtney follows them. But it seemed like a affirmation of the show. But you must remember that I didn't like Davison at this point. He to me was the bad Doctor, because he was young. It's very interesting that that nowadays people are and it's lovely, but people younger fans of are very happy because they are now getting represented by the Doctor, whether it be the we have a black Doctor coming now, or we had Joe Martin. I remember somebody talking to somebody recently saying how important it was to a black friend of theirs that there was Joe Martin, had finally been a black Doctor, and you can't underestimate that sort of stuff. And of course Jodie Whittaker is the female Doctor. But for me, as a young person, and I know it's very different, but as a young person, the youngest Doctor held no interest for me whatsoever. It wasn't that I needed to identify with that aspect of the Doctor at all. I needed a father figure. Is that what it is? Maybe that's what it is. But I love Davison now. He's high up on my list of favourites now. But and you are the notorious Renegades. There's a bit that's in the special edition. Oh gosh, yes, because I'm used to watching the special edition. So there's a bit where Philip Latham seems to go quite Welsh. I don't know if he was. He goes, Rassilon lives. He is immortal. That's gone. But of course, Rassilon in the special edition has had his voice treated, whereas he's just basically old King Cole in a kaleidoscope here. And Richard Matthews has that sort of slightly odd enunciation. Be very sure. I've had lots of cakes and ale, and I'm old King Cole. Again, I think now. And isn't it wonderful that it's the first Doctor? I find that I love the fact that even though he's the younger Doctor, he is the senior Doctor. He's the original, you might say, and that and I think it's lovely as well for Herndl, because he's the one actor that isn't, strictly speaking, the Doctor, gets to solve it, and that just seems right to me. It seems respectful and kind, both within and without the drama. I'm very happy with it. Immortality. I remember seeing Richard Matthews in a BBC Shakespeare and going, I think I know. Oh, and then he went something like, yes, hello, I am a thing. I went, oh, yeah. But I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else. Whereas now, of course, you would offer that to the most famous actor in the world. You'd go, you only have to come in for an afternoon. We'll film you in front of a curtain and you could go home for your tea. But again, this was genius. This was the sort of thing that I love. That image of the faces, set in stone. But I remember thinking that was so clever when I was a kid. That's a great shot as well. The fact that Barusa, turns around and vanishes, but he's in front of the plinth that's been laid ready for him. That I love the fact that they temporarily come alive just when somebody else is about to be stuck in they're a bit like the paving stone in Love and Monsters, aren't they? Actually, you stick Shirley Henderson next to them. I love the way Patrick Troughton hides behind John Pertwee. What a glorious man he is. But yeah, you'd I know. Yes. Now this doesn't quite fit in. For anyone who'd been in any doubt about the beginning bits, would have then gone, even though it's lovely that the staff get stuck in the door, you sort of go, that doesn't tie in with what we've had before remotely. And I think there's a nice bit in the book, isn't there, where it says his eyes sort of, or have I imagined that? But it's that he slightly lingers before he vanishes. But yes, I remember being very cross that you've chosen wisely, Doctor. I'll get to why I was cross. I remember as a kid, thinking how clever this was. And of course, it's not remotely clever at all. He who wins shall lose, and blah blah blah. It's really simple. But as a kid, it's one of those. It's like when you read about sort of Greek riddles or whatever in his history books or puzzle books or whatever. Anything that you had a chance in hell of getting, and then when you learnt the answer, you remembered the riddle and thought was really, really clever. It was those are sort of their brain exercise, aren't they? Their brain food. They nurture your reasoning and intelligence and even your sense of humour. A sentence that has a double meaning that the Doctor saw through is perfect. I mean, they needn't have been there. Let's be honest. If they hadn't, if they hadn't been there, Lord President Bruce would have claimed immortality and would have been stuck as a head in a plinth. But I still think that's a wise, decision by Dix. Fancy pants. You're the Scarecrow, mate. I think it was wise to keep it fairly simple and to give us what we wanted, which was lots of lovely banter between the different characters. But the banter is of a different character depending on who the people are, because Terence Dix knows these people so well. Or if he doesn't, he's just very adept at writing in their voices. It's a better piece of script writing than it seems, I think, because it's obviously a sort of fairly straightforward board game, essentially. But the way that he keeps it going and keeps you interested and has so many memorable lines and set pieces and nods to the past and gives everybody different bits to do. But I remember being furious with Davison for saying, I'm certainly not the man I was, thank goodness. I go, you're not fit to lick their boots. You are the new Doctor. You must be nicer and more deferential to the old Doctors because the past is better and everything new and that is close to me and like me and in my lifetime is awful because of self-loathing. There's something about the way that the guards sort of march around. It's quite funny. But Davison's not unlike Troughton with the sort of slightly... He's slightly sort of schoolboyish, isn't he, as well? I haven't really thought about that before. And I think that's quite a nice touch that they decide to make the Doctor president.
The full council has exercised its emergency powers to appoint you to the position of president. Office immediately.
That's again, and of course the Doctor does that very clever thing of outwitting her with the power that she has bestows her. He does that brilliantly. I am president, I am not. Yes, so he that's a really brilliantly Doctor-y thing to do, and it totally works. It's a lovely, neat little wheeze that at the end. I love the 5 Doctors. I've got to choose 5 things about it. Bernard, shush, shush, shush. It's just the TARDIS. Bernard has just woken up. So unless there's some Cybermen outside trying to break in, but I think Bernard, shush! Bernard, shush! Sorry. He's obviously sensed that there's something in the air. I don't think there's any Cybermen outside. I like the way that Mark Strickson thinks the Cybermen will be furious. Bernard, shush! And it's quite a contrived little bit of dialogue at the end, but it kind of works. I like it. I like the fact that they have the old theme and the new theme as well. I think that's lovely. But yeah, it's quite a contrived piece of exchange at the end, but it gives us that how it all started. Why not? So yes, I very much like the 5 Doctors. It's got so much nostalgia from me. I haven't actually watched this version, as I said, for a very, very long time. Some bits actually surprised me slightly because I was expecting a sound cue or a line delivery that's actually from the special edition, and that shows how my memory has sort of warped over time, because there was a very long time where every single music cue, every single plink, every plonk, every line, I mean, I could quote it verbatim, and I could anticipate, every look, every breath. And I was actually quite surprised that some bits there, I was like, oh, no, that's not what I was expecting. Whereas, not that long ago, i.e. 30 years ago, because I still think of this as quite recent, I would have anticipated all of those things. I haven't even begun to think about my favourite things. Well, a couple that occurred to me, so let's get them out of the way quickly. Troughton and the Brigadier. Troughton and Courtney, the second Doctor and the Brigadier. Their scenes, I think, are the best. Their banter is the best. I think Terence Dix writes them so wittily. The not exactly Brigadier, it's his tomb. All of that, considerably more than you do, Brigadier. Just the way that Troughton bashes him on the arm, as if say, "Come on, let's go on a jaunt." I love the pair of them. I could watch them forever. And it's funny because I love Troughton and Levine in the Three Doctors, and that's a totally different dynamic. But Troughton has a great way of infectiously bouncing off people, as he does with Fraser / Jamie. I love him so much, and the Brigadier is a great foil. Nicholas Courtney is a wonderful straight man. He is a very giving actor in that sense, in that he is, he's prepared to be the wall that you lean on, if you like. I love him too. I love everyone in this. I mean, I could just choose the 5 Doctors, couldn't I? That would be the honourable way to do it. Would be to choose the 5 Doctors. But I'm not. I'm gonna try and intellectualize this or even do what I think is right. I'm just gonna go with what pops into my head, really. So number 1 is definitely Troughton and the Brigadier. Number 2 is the Cyber Massacre. / the Raston Warrior Robot. But even all that, free Sarah Jane if you move with it. I think those arrows were great. They looked like they were going at the speed of light when I was a kid. Just the inventive deaths, the hand clench, the sick, the chopping their heads off, and even the start of it, because I knew when it was coming, because it started with the reflection of the Cyberman in the water, and you knew, we're now going to get a sequence where everyone's going to get, smashed to bits. Glorious. And just that simple effect of it's a man in a silver one piece who jumps and then there's a cut, but it all works really, really well. It's a brilliant sequence. It's definitely the best directed sequence in the whole episode, I think. Okay, so they're my 2 main ones. I like the fact that it's the first Doctor that gets it. I mean, as I say, it's completely topsy-turvy because he's the youngest Doctor. But and especially in the way that we are now, and maybe it's because of because I thought this as a kid as well. Did I ever think the older generation were old farts? Because I know that I'm distinctly aware that but it's because I've got kids, that the younger generation think of older people as, people who don't know anything. I quite like that respect for your elders thing, and as I say, but it's also because Herndl within the drama is not made to feel like the imposter, but by being the one that works out the riddle. I think that's a really nice touch. I think I explained it in the episode. So I like the fact that it's the first Doctor who works out the secret, as it were. I mean, I could choose any tiny bits of Troughton's performance. I could choose any tiny bits of Elizabeth Sladen's performance too. Just those little bits that she does. So that's 3. So I've got the. I've said I was going to go on instinct, and now I'm thinking about it way too hard. I mean, the use of Sharda is very, very clever. I do like the tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock incidental music. I do like that. I do like Barusa's board game. I like Philip Latham. I like Anthony Ainley capering down the stairs with the music going plinkety-blonkety. What now? Oh, now Chris is good on the old special effects too. So I wonder if he's going to choose like the matte painting of Rassilon or the glass painting of Rassilon or whatever it's called. I like the scene between the 5th Doctor and the Master, and then the Cybermen coming down, and then the after you, the zap, the Doctor then not being able to leave his stricken enemy, and then and the Alice line, and then not today, thank you, or whatever he says at the end when he then transmats to Gallifrey. It's all very important to the plot. I like the fact that they've got Susan out even though she then has to go back in the TARDIS and stay there. But yeah. But I love that scene, and I like the sort of the Cybermen coming down, and I noticed it for the first time because I'm watching it on the big screen. The fact that as they're coming down, David Banks is at the top, standing on a hill brilliantly. So the scene between the Fifth Doctor and the Master. So that's a nice little nod to the Master. And do you know what? Because he gets so much stick, but I think it's a really important part of the story. And because you can't kill any of the returning, bit mean to bring back Susan and then kill her. Do you know what I mean? That would leave a really nasty taste in the mouth. There has to be some cost to all of this, and one of the costs is that Barusa, who we previously liked, is the bad guy. But I don't really like that, and that's not because I think it's a mistake. I'm supposed I get not to like it, but I still don't like it. I would rather Barusa had stayed a goodie, but of course that's why it's a twist, and it is. I've read Terence Dick's justifying it; it makes perfect sense, but I still don't like it, and I think Philip Latham is great. But I'm going to give it to Paul Jericho, because I think the death of the Castellan is it's a turning point of the drama. I think he does I remember reading in the book, I think it said when he sees the Black Scrolls, he looks really haunted, all that sort of thing, and you can see all of that in his performance. And I like the way he does the hands thing. I like the way he dies with his eyes open. I like his delivery of most of his lines, and I do think he's a very memorable character, and so that his death actually means something. And because he gets so much stick for no, not the mind probe, and he does really make balls up of the unanimous line. But so his first line and his last line, but okay, but everything in between. And as a kid, I did really feel that, and it felt like a great cost, and because I was pleased to see him come back, because he'd been one of the best things about Arc of Infinity. Damn it, I'm going to give it to Paul Jericho. But that means I haven't done the music. I do like the music, but I never quite liked the horn. I don't know why, because it's a great motif, but I don't know. I always just thought it sounded French. I know nothing about music, but I just remember, I love the tick-tock, and I love the woo, the music. It's a really good score, but I never quite like the horn. I don't know why. And I love it now because it's sort of memorable and evocative, but so much of me is judging this through the eyes of the kid. Do I go for Paul Jericho, or do I go for the music? I'm going to go for Paul Jericho. I don't care. I'm going to go for the Castellan. I'm sorry, the music. The music is wonderful. I love the clocky music. Oh, and I love the board game as well. I think that's beautiful. I love all the kidnaps. I love Pertwee Corner. No, I've gone for what I've gone for. Doesn't matter. I never win. I'm sure this isn't really what you listen for. So, what has Chris chosen?
So, without further ado, firstly, I'd like to choose Terence Dicks, because he had the seemingly impossible task of getting the surviving doctors and the companions and the villains and monsters all together and weaving it into some kind of coherent story. So the fact that it turns out as well as it did, I mean, hats off to Terence, who did such an excellent job. It's just like a big party and celebration of the show. So well done.
I deserve to lose everything, because yes, there was I scratching around in such a brilliant story that's got so much to celebrate about it, and it's a celebration in itself. And I've talked about how brilliantly Terence Dicks does, opting for a simple story, but sprinkling all those lovely little grace notes, juggling the characters so well, orchestrating the action brilliantly, having loads of stuff that's that you can latch onto as a kid. Terence Dicks, who is as I say, we've talked about as a script editor and as just a legendary figure who towers over all Doctor Who as we know it. And I remember as a kid it just seeming so right that his name was on it as a writer, because he'd written all the books. Terrance Dicks is definitely. I should definitely have chosen Terrance Dicks above some of the things. I should have chosen Terrance Dicks first. Chris has chosen absolutely the right thing first. I am an idiot. I'd resign from this podcast were I not it. I deserve to lose this. For those of you that can't see, by the way, because Chris has done a video, he has got a pineapple on his video as part of his backdrop, his 4-poster-bed backdrop. I'm so sorry I didn't choose Terrance Dicks. Of course I should have chosen Terrance Dicks. I love Terrance Dicks. He was such a nice man, and such a great ambassador for Doctor who turned out to every event that he could. Quite often he had in mind what he was going to say, and he blooming well said it, but he had no grandness about him at all. I loved his description of himself to his kids. His kids said, "Are you famous?" And he said, "Yes, but only to a very small amount of people." He had such a brilliant sense of humour, and he was he made me cry once at Gallifrey, and I can't even remember exactly what he said, but we were talking, and he said something about how when he first met me at at a commentary, and seeing you now doing this and all that sort of thing, and it was just. I was with my ex-wife again as well, and we sort of went into a corner, and I had tears in my eyes. She said, "What's up?" I said, "Terrance Dicks just said something really lovely to me," oh gosh, yeah. Oh, I'm so lucky to spend time with these people. And then there was the other time I sat on was that in Chicago as well? I was on a panel. It was myself, Lisa Bowerman, and Terrance Dicks. So I think it was Who's Left, and he said the phrase, "John Nathan Turner couldn't sell Welks," which I thought was joyous. I love you, Terrance Dicks. I wish I'd chosen Terrance Dicks. I'm an idiot.
Secondly, I think it's a bit of a broad one, this, but it's difficult to pin down particular moments. But I'd like to choose the interplay between the actors, because it works so well, the way the companions interact with the doctors and the doctors with each other, the pairings of Sarah Jane and the third Doctor. I particularly am fond of the interplay between Patrick Troughton and Nick Courtney, so the second Doctor and the Brig. I think Patrick Troughton steals a lot of the scenes in the special. So yeah, it's a bit broad, but I'd like to chuck that in.
I might be allowed a bit of a point for that, because although he chose the interplay, he did specify, Troughton and Courtney as the king of it. But then again, even if I deserve a smattering of a point for that, I deserve to have it taken away from me for not choosing Terrance Dicks. So I will leave this process with nothing, and thoroughly deserved. What an idiot! Scrabbling. It's very odd, this, because as quite often happens, I'll scrabble around for something. I don't know why. I mean, this is essentially live. This. And then the person will say something. I go, yes, of course, that's really obvious. It's funny how your sort of mouth and brain let you down when you're in the thick of it. This is why the Doctor is such a wonderful character, because the Doctor knows how to choose the right thing, as proved in the 5 Doctors. What has Chris chosen? Probably something really obvious that I haven't mentioned.
And then I think I'm going to pick one of the most impressive visual effect sequences in the show's history, which is the Raston warrior robot massacring the cyber leader and troops. I feel this was really well executed, forgive the pun. Some ghastly moments in there, like the cyber milk. But yeah, that's a standout action sequence from classic series history, I think. So I'd like to pop that one in.
Yeah, cyber milk. I like that. Yeah, okay. Well, do you know what? I'm going to stop self-flagellating now. I have a point. I mean, in one meaning of that sentence, and not in the other. I've got a point for choosing the cyber massacre, so I will emerge with a little bit of dignity, because I'm sure Chris will now choose two things that I didn't think of. But I could still actually win at this stage.
And I think if I had to pick a line, I'm going to pick the obvious one, so you should be able to guess this. I'm going to go for the Castellan, played by Paul Jericho, with "No, not the mind probe." Sorry, apologies, that was not a very good rendition of the line.
Oh, now hang on. I chose the Castellan, and I did choose the Brigadier. I think, am I going to win or am I going to lose? Well, he who wins loses. Because I've got, as I say, number 2 I got a sort of bit of, didn't I? Number 3, definitely spot on. Number 4, I said Paul Jericho / the Castellan, but he specified a bit that Paul Jericho the Castellan does. A benevolent judge of this, a benevolent disembodied old King Colehead with some disco lights driving past him might say I'm doing very well here. If I'd gone for the one I should have done at the beginning, I think I would now be cruising to victory. Anyway, number 5.
And then finally, I think I'm going to pick the score to the Five Doctors and the end credits theme arrangement, because from that Gallifreyan horn sound, I feel that right through to the end credits with the mashup of the 60s and the then current 80s Peter Howe version of the theme is just so well done, and a nice nod to the series history as well. I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoy it, Toby. And to everyone out there watching and listening, stay safe and see you on the flip side. Thank you.
Yes, that is because Chris was talking in a time of COVID, of Great Plague. I'll tell you what it was about the horn I didn't like. It sounded like when people used to make music out of blowing into 2 bits of paper. Did people do that? Or have I just dreamt that? They'd make or in blades of grass. Yeah. I don't like that. I don't know why I don't like the horn. I just don't like the horn. I love the rest of it. And to be fair, if I had chosen the score, I wouldn't have chosen Paul Jericho. So I'm not going to sort of go, oh, it's so near and yet so far. I always like to, yeah. Anyway, let's not get into that. But yes, but I still did okay there. But part of me thinks I should have chosen the score because I like a lot of the elements of it very, very much, and I think it's excellent. Dude, I love the sort of kidnappy music, and that certainly that stuff in the early piece where where he's placing the pieces on the board and all of that. I think that's really evocative, and the chase, when everyone gets chased. Oh, and then the music at Pertwee Corner. No. Yeah, it's a great score. There's something about the sort of the blade of grass horn that I don't know. I don't know anything about music, so it's not a criticism. But yes, I should have remembered Terrence Dicks. And thanks to Chris, yes, who was talking. I think he recorded that during COVID times, out of which we hopefully have pretty much emerged. But I chose the 20th anniversary special for Happy Times and Places number 50. Because it made a certain sort of sense to me, and because somebody has chosen the 50th anniversary special, but they haven't recorded their contribution to it yet, and they have a very good excuse, so that's fine. But I wanted to do some sort of landmark, and to me, this was a great landmark. It just seemed like Doctor Who was such a part of the cultural furniture, and it has that added thing of I'd missed it, and some people had gone to the effort because my Doctor Who thing was deemed worth making an effort, a sort of sacrifice, or at least just some time, some energy towards me, which was lovely, and I didn't feel was always the case. And so, yeah, in fact, anything that was sort of done for me sort of special as a kid, and I was sort of bashed from pillar to post out of necessity because Mum was a bit stuck and I was the youngest and sort of least capable, and we didn't have any money, and so yeah, there was necessities that needed to be done involving where I was and what I did. So yeah, my other needs I sometimes felt was subservient to the practical necessity. So whenever anything actually was done for me, it revolved around Doctor Who. That was, and it seemed, wow, so Doctor Who must be special if that's the thing that people will go out of their way to sort of arrange on my behalf. And thereafter, actually, our local vicar, who was one of the first people we actually knew as opposed to somebody at school, had a video, and he used to record Doctor Who from season 21, and on the brief period I was at home, I would be taken to the vicar's house on the Sunday, and we'd watch the 2 episodes of Doctor Who from that week, except for Frontios, where he didn't record he taped over episode 2 by accident. I remember not seeing Frontios episode 2, and Caves of Androzani, where we couldn't go the first weekend, so I watched the whole thing in one go. Oh my God, that was exciting. So there we go. So, gosh, I'd forgotten a lot of those things that came out of my mouth until I said them. That's the wonderful thing about Doctor Who. It's such a tool for nostalgia. And, for Chris, his nostalgia is actually after the event. His nostalgia is watching it as a VHS. I'm sure there's somebody else out there whose nostalgia is getting the DVD and watching 1-2 versions of it, and then each version with a different commentary and blah-de-blah. But I got quite nostalgic about the commentary with Helen Rayner, Phil Collinson and David Tennant, because that seemed another sort of part of Doctor Who being part of the fabric of everywhere, because that's what it was at that time. But it was lovely that the modern show was giving affirmation to the old show in the same way as I felt the 5 Doctors was important, because the old show of the Doctors of yore and the companions of yore were giving affirmation to the new show, the sort of Peter Davison era, the Doctor Who that I was old enough to watch. So and I don't think Doctor Who behoves itself when it gets too self-referential too often, but I think it's absolutely allowed to at those key times, and actually, the more you eke it out, the more special it is when it happens. And because it had only really happened with the 3 Doctors, and I suppose there were all those references in season 20, but it just seemed, it just seemed very, very special. And the celebration and the 20th anniversary Radio Time special, it was just a very special time to be a Doctor Who fan. And I count myself lucky that my blossoming as a fan was at a time when all of this stuff was out there and available, and I think it gave great foundations for the edifice you see in here before you now. So thanks for listening. Thanks to Chris, very nice fellow who I haven't seen in far too long, so nice to connect. Good choice of story. I love the 5 Doctors. I can never quite sort of place it in the canon, really. It's such a sort of separate entity for me because, as I say, I was so familiar with it for so long, and yet it was sort of removed from my normal experience of the program. So I'll still never quite, and any score I ever gave it would not be objective at all. It's a much more subjective experience than perhaps a lot of other Doctor Who's, because it's anchored in so many different other parts of my life, more so than all the other stories that surrounds it, I suppose, because it's a celebration in and of itself as well. Anyway, I've spoken far too long. I'm sorry Bernard got spooked at the end there. I hope the Cybermen aren't waiting outside. Oh God, I've just seen the clock counter. It's quite a long one, this. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to this podcast. Big, isn't it? Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest was Chris Cassell, who can be found on Twitter at Chris Cassell81. Cassell is 2 S's, 2 L's. I'm very grateful to him, and also to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Duncan Harvey, Luke Atkins, Peter Adamson, John Arnold, Kevin Ashelford, James Bell, Will Brooks, Rick Byatt, Robin Bland, Alex Kapajoglu, Paul Carnahan, Andy Case, John Curley, Mark Dakin, John Elledge, Sam Estiram, Gary Gillett, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, David Green, Fraser Gregory, Paul Gregory, Dave Hoskin, Richie Howarth, Andrew Jordan, Ashley Knight, Clive Lewis, Guy Lambert, James Lark, Gavin McLean, David Matthewman, John McClay, Ross McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, and Matthew Newton. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork, Dylan Patterson. Oh, if you would like to join that list of names, then you can do so by becoming a patron. Being mentioned in the credits is just one of the perks, which also include bonus material, exclusive releases, and much, much earlier access to the podcasts wherever you're listening to this. Well, wherever. I can't change that. I can't alter even patrons. I can't make you listen to it in a castle or Miami. You listen to it wherever you are. But whenever I can do time, not space. Because if you're a patron, you get these a good 6 months in advance of the releases. For non-patrons, because patrons get something 3 times a week. Well, I mean something with my voice on it 3 times a week, because you also get something on the Tuesdays, which is a picture of my dog. But I know that's not a deal breaker, although it is worryingly the favourite thing of a lot of people. And I thought I was the draw. So yes, become a patron at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. A monthly commitment is an extraordinary thing to ask anybody to do in these times of great financial difficulty. Ko-fi is a place where you can pop a few pennies in whenever you're so inclined without any commitment whatsoever. But even that I know is difficult. But what costs you nothing is to go to iTunes and to give these 5 stars and some nice reviews, which really helps spread the word. And you can also avail yourself of my day job, really. I'm a stand-up comic. I run a comedy club in Manchester called Excess Malarkey. That's on Twitter, at Excess Malarkey. It's on Twitch TV. All the shows that we did when we couldn't do live shows because of, being locked in due to plague, on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. There's an archive of all the worldwide comedians that did some great work for us, spreading happiness as the world was in the grip of quite a lot of unpleasantness. But we're back live every Tuesday in Manchester at 8 p.m. So if you can get to us, please do. But if not, twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey online. Now, having shouted at poor old Bernard to be quiet because there was nothing out there, apart from the fact the front door was open when I went to bed, and it had certainly been closed when I started the commentary, and there was nobody else who could possibly have opened the door. So, like the door, like the entrance to Rassilon's tomb, it opened on its own. How spooky is that? Very spooky is the answer. Very spooky indeed.